Hello, welcome to Next Big Future. I'm going to make the case for Mars. People who are saying that we cannot get to Mars and a colonization of it will fail are science YouTuber Sabine Hossenfelder and famous astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson. So let's quickly take a listen to what Sabine has to say about that.
There. Okay, so these are, I think, all the major points to consider. Terraforming Mars is almost certainly not economically feasible, not within the next several hundred years. Living in habitats, probably possible if Musk attracts governmental support, though I suspect they'll have a hard time finding sufficiently many volunteers. There are no good economic reasons to do it. For scientific purposes, it'd make more sense to send robots. The major reason to do it is mitigating existential risks for humanity. And to evaluate the latter, we'll have to ask about the opportunity costs. What is it that we won't be able to do if we pour so much resources, money, people, materials into a Mars colony? There'll be less left to develop technologies like nuclear fusion, artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, or bionics, all of which would make life on Earth better and would also make moving to Mars later dramatically simpler and almost certainly cheaper. Basically, I arrive at the conclusion that moving to Mars is a good idea, but it's too early. I think we should first develop better power sources.
Okay, so let's go over to the slides there to go over the anti-Mars case. So no business case for Mars or even economic reasons, cannot terraform for hundreds of years, need a lot of government help, maybe all government help in the Neil deGrasse Tyson, Sabine Hossenfelder view, and they have gotten a lot of grants from government. So they believe in government, but they have not made money in business other than through their communications and stuff. The only reason to save humanity in the long term. And then somehow this will cause opportunity costs where we can't develop nuclear fusion and AI. So I say there is a business case for Mars. Terraforming is not needed initially. You can partially terraform Mars to get to the point where you can just have an air mask and breathe oxygen, but don't need a heavy spacesuit. That would take some time, but is cheaper than what they're talking about. Government colonization, they're wrong now, and also don't even look at history to see that private enterprise was instrumental in colonizing during the colonization of America. I say their view on opportunity cost is actually flipped. There's more opportunity, not less, when you go colonize Mars. And Mars opens the entire solar system and beyond by when you get the capability to put a whole city there, you have massive space capabilities. So you're not just going to Mars, you're going to the entire solar system and studying the entire galaxy. So who am I? I'm Brian Wang. I'm a fundraiser. I'm raising a fund of funds to invest in VC funds. I'm an advisor to a space startup working on launch and satellites, Sidereus Space. I've already invested in SpaceX through perception first vehicles, and I did some work for Airbus Ventures back when they looking at their portfolio and doing some promotional analysis of those ventures. So quite a bit of space activity, and I've written over 30,000 articles on my website studying deep science technology, including about 8,000 on space. So the Mars plan is that Elon wants to put a city on Mars with 1 million people. He feels that will make it sustainable to keep supporting itself. Part of that would be to send 1,000 SpaceX Starships, which we've launched about 5 times towards orbit, and have recently caught the booster stage of it. They want to make it fully reusable. If you launch 1,000 Starships, you will take 250 tons to Mars every 2 years. So solving the Mars money problem is that there will be they'll make Giga Factories on Mars and AI data centers. So Elon has about 5 Giga Factories on Earth to make Tesla cars, and he has a Star Factory to make rocket ships and rocket engines for SpaceX. So he has made many large factories here on Earth. And he's also made a data center. xAI is a company worth $50 billion and is one of the leaders in developing large language model AI. There's been talk in the industry of spending $150 each for each new AI data center in the 2025 to 2027 timeframe, where you would make 1 million GPUs, NVIDIA GPUs, to make your AI data center. The picture on the right is the xAI data center with 100,000 GPUs. It is the largest in the world, and they had key technological innovations so they could scale beyond 30,000 GPUs to 100,000. And they're now adding in 200,000, another 100,000 to get 200,000 GPUs. This data center is already completed. The 200,000 GPUs are done this month, and they're going to expand to 1 million GPUs in 2025. When you go to 1 million, like I said, you spend about $150 billion because the GPUs alone cost $40 billion. So when you're talking that kind of money, that is space program type money, right? You can make, your launches of all your Starships kind of with that kind of cost. So I'll go over those costs in detail. Elon Musk, unlike Sabine and Neil, I like them. They do nice science talks, but Elon has actually made money, closing in on $500 billion of net worth, and his companies are worth combined closing in on $2 trillion. He's double the wealth of the next wealthiest person, Jeff Bezos, who made Amazon, which is no slouch. So the Star Factory, there was a review by Everyday Astronaut where he and Elon went to look at the Star Base, which also has factory productions in Austin, Texas. And here are 5 of the booster stages, all in the high bay. So these things are being mass produced. It is happening. So when they say there's no economics to it, you have to look at economics with cost versus revenue. 1,000 Starship flights every 2 years would take about $20 billion worth of fuel. It's actually $2 billion of fuel to go to Mars, but there's about 10 refuelings that have to occur. Where you launch to orbit, you only have like 10% of the fuel left, and you gotta launch again and add 10% and pretend to get back to 100% fueling. So we have to do refueling in space. To get to 1 million people, you need to pretty quickly scale up to 10,000 colonists per trip. If they're paying 100,000 each, then that'd be $1 billion. 100,000 colonists per trip, so that over 10 trips, over 20 years, you get to 1 million. That'd be $10 billion per trip if they're paying. So that could be a revenue stream for it. Also, if you're making Starship factories on Mars and you make 5,000 Starships, those Starships could be flown back to Earth for use in a fleet of Starships that were, say, taking over air cargo delivery, or they're going to explore the entire solar system. So I think there's value in those ships. If they're $20 million a piece, that would be $100 million. But if you have Tesla bots building them and factories, automated production facilities with some colonists, then the costs could go down because the minerals would be free for the taking. If you could get the iron on Mars. 10 million GPUs. If you build a 10 million GPU data center, let's say in the early 2030s, then the GPUs could cost $400 billion, but then all the facilities, all the energy, which can triple the cost of the facility, could all be, again, free because all your land, all you're making square mile to square mile of solar could be just laid out, and you have all that land free to use because you just have Mars wide open. And then the result could be sent back by satellites of a small model, perhaps only a few terabytes or 100 terabytes in size or petabyte in size. The trained AI model would be transmitted back for use here on Earth. So, and then you could constantly just upgrade the chips, just like you're upgrading the chips in the data centers here on Earth. Sending them there with Starship, because you have a fully fueled Starship, instead of taking 6 to 9 months to get to Mars, you can get there in 60 to 90 days. So you could start training, within 3 months of getting there, and then install the chips, say another month. That'd be like 4 months to get going on it, to recycle the chips from a facility that had all the solar and buildings built out. So again, I was saying, so that is a highly valuable thing that I think um, is in line with things that we're building here on Earth today, and which Elon is highly experienced in. Colonization during the 1600s and 1700s, 1800s was mostly private. The countries granted charters and land rights to the traders. If you don't have the government owning Mars, they, SpaceX can just go to Mars and develop it. You don't have to have a charter or land rights. And there was political and military protection because you had multiple countries colonizing. You had England, you had Spain, you had Portugal, you had France, and they're all fighting stuff. They're fighting each other. So it's like they're protecting the mafia, protecting you from other mafia. So if you go to Mars and you're the only one with the spaceships to do it, you don't need the government to protect you from, China or Russia. And they're way behind in terms of their space capability. China and Russia would not be able to go to Mars in force to do something to a Mars colony. And a starship, each one of the 1,000 starships there, they are each a reusable missile, right? And they a reusable bomber. They can just load up with rocks and release them at 20 times the speed of sound, and they would hit with, if you 4 to 10 times the power of TNT by weight. So one starship with 200 tons of material, releasing that material at Mach 20 would be like 800 tons of TNT, getting into the range of a nuclear bomb. So for other countries with inferior space capabilities, they cannot challenge the Mars colony in Mars City. And the governments took a cut of the wealth. They just back in the day, they would just take, furs and treasures, whatever they got from there. Private enterprise joint stock companies were funded the British method. Virginia joint stock company was what was funding one of the earliest colonies, which was Jamestown. Portuguese basically kind of like made captains of ships, private enterprise people who could do all kinds of trading in order to develop the colonies. So yes, government funded, like Queen Isabella funded Columbus and his trip to the New World, but pretty much all the other ones quickly got mostly private. And those old colonization industries, fur trade, agriculture, growing tobacco and things, shipbuilding, and I'm saying we will repeat that by building starships, and space industries. And resource extraction, they would take lumber, naval stores, and they stole from the existing people. Obviously, not something that's possible because there's nothing to steal from in terms of like Martians now. But you can take resources from the solar system, which is 1 million times more resources than are here on Earth. We do not need to terraform Mars in the first few decades, and we won't. We can have dome canyons, craters from Mars, things buried into there where we are protected from radiation and can cover a vast, large area with oxygen so that people don't feel constrained or imprisoned. Sabine makes the case in her video about if you're terraforming that you wouldn't be able to keep the atmosphere that you generate. There's a very thin atmosphere on Mars and it doesn't have much oxygen. It's only 6 millibars, so 160 times less dense atmosphere than we have an atmosphere on Earth. But that atmosphere on Mars, as thin it is, weighs 25 trillion tons. The solar wind erodes, because there's no magnetosphere, erodes that atmosphere by about 3 million tons per year. So if we do some terraforming and increase the Martian atmosphere 10 times, 100 times, we'll generate 250 trillion tons, if 10 times more, and we'll generate 2,500 trillion tons if we get it 100 times more dense. And again, the solar wind only erodes it slightly. So getting to making a magnetosphere with 3,000 kilometers of superconducting cable, which is a proposal to create a magnetosphere, is something that we do not need to do in the near term. Plus, you could put a satellite between Mars and the sun that would have the superconducting thing to have the magnets that would protect against the solar wind. So the solar wind solutions are doable. And even if you don't do it initially, if you generate the atmosphere you don't have to worry about the solar wind taking it away in anything like a short time frame. So all of that terraforming, we can do it after. We can make zones, big domes and stuff that have an atmosphere. And then if we do generate atmosphere by raising the temperature of Mars to make the CO2 that's frozen there um, sublimate, basically melt, then that atmosphere is safe from the solar wind because they're only losing a very tiny amount to the solar wind. Mars has enough frozen CO2 so you can almost triple the pressure there. And there's other deposits of other materials, like in the neolate phosphate mineral deposits, that could be used to get us up to useful atmosphere. Once we get beyond 65 millibars, about 11 times more than we have currently on Mars, you pass the Armstrong limit, which means water does not boil at body temperature. So that's a good thing. You don't want to have your water boil off at body temperature. You want to be able to walk around with just oxygen masks and maybe like, parkas or something like that to keep warm. So then you don't have the heavy spacesuits. So that can be done. I have other videos where I discuss how that can be done. The way to warm it up cheaply, there was some recent papers about using nanorods that by producing those in reasonable quantities, you can quickly get the Mars atmosphere to warm up because they're a super greenhouse gas material. They have already done this in the lab, like a large lab setting where they make for a few kilograms or tons of this material. So it's not that difficult to do. They have done it. If you scale that up to factory scale and bring that to Mars with, say, 14 Starships, then you can start raising the temperature. They think in 10 years after you've landed the power supply in factories, you could warm up by 10 degrees Celsius. If you started in 2030, then you could get a 10-degree warming by 2040, which would be substantial. And then once you get warmed up, all the stuff starts melting. You get more, the oxygen just comes from the soil into the atmosphere, and you start getting some significant terraforming. So to summarize more of the pro-Mars case, AI training and Starship factories can be profitable for Mars. It is a purpose because you have land and energy there. Yes, there's only 40% solar, but I just make twice as much, 3 times as much solar, and I still have as much solar as I need. I just bring the materials and just assemble them with Tesla bots, say. So you don't need terraforming initially. You can go underground or cover over domes and valleys, melt and get CO2 material, oxygen material, so that you can then have atmosphere inside of a dome. Partial terraforming is possible with super greenhouse gases. The government is not needed on this thing. It's good to have some money, but the cost of this project could be $1 trillion, which would be more than the funding of other NASA missions. Although $200 billion was spent on the International Space Station, $200 billion was spent on the space shuttle program, but the SpaceX programs are far, far cheaper. So the government could do it, but even if they don't, the fact that SpaceX could soon be making $200 billion or even $1 trillion of profit by having most of the global communications on Earth via satellite. They have 7,000 satellites there now. They can put 40,000 up there and get 1/3 of global communications. To say, oh, that's impossible. They have already 5 million customers for high-speed bandwidth, high-speed internet, and they have deals to provide cell phone communications direct to satellites. So your cell phone can then talk to satellite. So generating that much money is possible. So then go to the opportunity costs. I said more opportunities, not less. One, AI. If I'm making massive AI data centers there, pushing AI, I'm getting more AI. They could make a lot more nuclear reactors on Mars. If I bring them there, because I'm bringing 250,000 tons every 2 years to Mars, I can bring the pieces of a nuclear reactor and put them on Mars. I can bring many reactors. I can bring factories to build reactors. So I would have more nuclear capability, not less. So And historically, all of the countries that did colonization had faster technological progress and faster economic progress. Yes, you're spending, but the challenge, the strain you're putting your country and people under to do the colonization is actually a positive thing. Going for big goals enables you to do more big things. And Mars opened up the entire solar system. If I'm flying 1,000 starships to Mars every 2 years, how many more missions can I do around the solar system? I can do a lot more, right? So it's if I do, we spent all that money on the mission to Apollo. Who else has done more uh, more space activity? The United States was a leader by being the leader going to the moon, spending the equivalent of hundreds of billions of dollars to do that. More capability was created, right? So then who else goes around the solar system? If NASA. So SpaceX going to Mars and developing that capability means they have a fleet of 1,000 starships that can also go other places. And if I build more starships on Mars, 5,000 a year, I can have a million, you know, in 30 years, I could have a million going around the entire solar system. And I would have mass production of all kinds of satellites. So doing more, you have more capability, you can do other things. It's not like I do it and I stop. Elon's talking about putting 5 starships to Mars in the first small fleet in 2026. So this capability is happening and it will be profitable and it will lift up civilization. Because if I develop Mars and develop the solar system, that's a good capability to have. You're a growing capability. In terms of the science of it, Sabine talked about, there's not enough science on Mars. If I have a capability to develop Mars City, I can then make billions of satellites with telescopes that I could put 20 times further than Pluto. That's something called the gravitational lens point. I can then look at the other side around the sun, where the sun acts as a lens, a gravitational lens, to focus the light onto the telescopes and make them 10 billion times better. So I can see lakes and rivers on other planets, oceans on other planets, all their atmosphere. And I can basically explore by telescope the entire galaxy. So going to Mars means I can explore the solar system and I can explore the galaxy. So way more science by developing this capability. So those are the reasons why we will develop Mars. It will succeed. It will be profitable. And we will get insane science by developing more space capability. Thank you and talk to you next time.